Princess Lyra stood in the grand throne room, her tall figure trembling with anger. The crystal walls around her glowed with soft blue light, but she barely noticed. Her mother, Empress, sat on the throne with a calm expression that made Lyra even more frustrated. "Mother, do I really have to marry a human?" Lyra protested, her voice echoing through the massive hall. The bioluminescent patterns on her skin flickered rapidly, showing her distress. In culture, these patterns were like emotions made visible. Right now, everyone could see she was upset. The Empress sighed. She had expected this reaction. "Yes, my daughter, the decision is final." Lyra paced back and forth, her long robe sweeping the polished floor. "But humans are so weak, they can't even breathe without their precious oxygen. They die if the temperature gets too hot or too cold. Their bodies break so easily." She threw her hands up in frustration. "And they only live for about 100 years. That's nothing. I'm already 250 years old." "I understand your concerns," the Empress said quietly, "but you must understand the situation we face." Lyra stopped packing. She knew what her mother meant. The war. The terrible war against the Horde that had been destroying their empire for the past 5 years. There were ruthless, insect-like creatures that attacked without mercy. They had already destroyed 12 colonies and killed millions. The Empress continued, "Our fleets are losing. Our technology, which we thought was superior, means nothing against numbers. They just keep coming, wave after wave. Our scientists cannot find a solution fast enough." "But humans," Lyra asked, "what can they possibly do that we cannot?" "They win wars," the Empress said simply. "The Human Federation has fought in 3 major battles. They won all 3, not because they have better weapons or stronger ships. They win because they think differently. They fight differently." Lyra wanted to argue, but she had heard the reports. The humans had indeed defeated forces that outnumbered them 5-1. She just didn't want to believe it. "This marriage will create an alliance," her mother explained. "The humans will share their military strategies with us. Their fleets will fight alongside ours. Together, we can push back and save our empire." "And I'm the price for this alliance," Lyra said bitterly. The Empress's expression softened. "You are my daughter and I love you, but you are also a princess. Sometimes we must make sacrifices for our people. Captain is a good man, according to all reports. He is a decorated war hero, intelligent and respectful. Give him a chance." Lyra turned away. She had no choice and she knew it, but that didn't mean she had to like it. The next week passed quickly. Lyra spent most of it in her chambers, reading everything she could find about humans. What she learned did not impress her. Humans came from a planet called Earth, a world that seemed determined to kill them at every turn. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, deadly diseases. Yet somehow they survived. They had only developed space travel 300 years ago, which was incredibly recent compared to the 5,000 years of space exploration. Humans were also violent. Their history was full of wars, conflicts, and struggles. They fought each other over resources, beliefs, territory, and sometimes for reasons that seemed completely pointless. Even now, with dozens of alien species in the galaxy, humans still argued among themselves. "Primitive barbarians," Lyra muttered to herself as she closed the data file. On the 7th day, Captain arrived. Lyra watched from her balcony as the human ship landed in the palace courtyard. It was smaller than vessels, built for function rather than beauty. The hull was from battles, and Lyra could see repair patches on the armor plating. When the airlock opened, Lyra got her first look at the man she was supposed to marry. Stepped out wearing a dark blue military uniform. He was tall for a human, though still shorter than Lyra. His hair was black, cut short in military style. His face was calm, showing no emotion as he looked around at the massive palace. Lyra studied him carefully. He didn't look frightened or nervous. Most aliens who visited the palace for the first time seemed overwhelmed by its size and beauty, but just walked forward with steady steps, as if he visited alien palaces every day. The formal meeting was arranged for that evening. Lyra dressed in her finest royal robes, making sure she looked as impressive and intimidating as possible. She wanted this human to understand the difference between their peoples. When she entered, the meeting chamber was already there. He stood respectfully, then bowed in the traditional manner. Lyra was surprised. He had learned their customs. "Your Highness," he said in perfect language without any accent, "it is an honor to meet you." Lyra nodded coolly. "Captain, welcome to our world." They sat across from each other at a long table. Servants brought refreshments, but neither of them touched the drinks. They simply looked at each other, measuring, evaluating. "I know this isn't what you wanted," said finally, breaking the silence. "It isn't what I wanted either. I'm a soldier, not a diplomat, but our peoples need this alliance." "You speak honestly," Lyra admitted. "Most would pretend to be happy about this arrangement." "I see no point in lying," replied. "We're both adults. We both understand duty. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending this is a love match." Lyra found herself slightly impressed despite her prejudice. "What do you expect from this marriage?" "Respect," said immediately. "I'll respect you, your culture, and your people. I ask the same in return. Beyond that, I hope we can work together to end this war. Many humans are dying. If our marriage can save even some of them, then it's worth it." "You truly believe humans can help us defeat the?" Lyra asked. "I know we can," said with quiet confidence. "Not because we're stronger, we're not, but we understand war in a way that most peaceful species don't. We've been fighting since we climbed down from the trees on our. It's in our nature." Lyra wanted to call that barbaric, but she held her tongue. Instead, she said, "I suppose we'll see soon enough. The military briefings start tomorrow. You'll be working with our strategists." "I look forward to it," said. They talked for another hour, discussing practical matters about the wedding ceremony and the alliance. Was polite but not warm, professional but not friendly. Lyra appreciated that. At least he wasn't trying to charm her with false affection. When the meeting ended, bowed again and left. Lyra sat alone in the chamber, thinking about this strange human who would soon be her husband. She still didn't like the situation. She still thought humans were primitive and weak, but at least seemed competent. That was something. Outside her window, the stars shone brightly. Somewhere out there, they were gathering their forces for another attack. And somewhere in this palace, a human soldier was preparing to help save an empire that looked down on his entire species. Lyra wondered which of them would be more surprised by what came next. The war room was one of the largest chambers in the palace. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star maps, fleet positions, and battle simulations. Lyra had been in this room hundreds of times during the war, watching her people's best military minds try to find ways to defeat the. She walked in expecting another boring meeting. What she found instead would change everything she thought she knew about humans. Admiral, a human woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, stood at the center display. Next to her was another human officer named Minu. Around the room, generals and strategists watched with skeptical expressions. "Thank you for coming," Admiral said in. Her accent was slight but noticeable. "We've analyzed your battle records from the past 5 years. We'd like to share our observations." General, the head of military forces, gestured impatiently. "Please proceed, though I doubt you'll find anything our own analysts haven't already discovered." Lyra saw and Minu exchange a quick glance. Neither smiled, but she could sense they were holding back reactions. That irritated her. Admiral activated the display. It showed the Battle of Kelvin Station, a disaster from 2 years ago where they lost 15 ships. "This engagement, you approached the fleet in standard formation, correct?" "Yes," General confirmed. "Our strongest ships in front support vessels behind. Standard military doctrine." "That's your first problem," Minu said bluntly. The know your doctrine. They've fought you for 5 years. They can predict exactly what you'll do. The officers shifted uncomfortably. One of them, Commander Bora, spoke up. Are you suggesting we abandon proven tactics? I'm suggesting you stop being predictable, Minyu replied. They are like insects on Earth. They're not individually smart, but their hive mind learns patterns. You keep using the same patterns, so they keep winning. Stepped forward. Let me show you something. He manipulated the hologram, rewinding the battle. Here, moment 17. Your flagship moves to engage their dreadnought. They immediately send 3 support ships to flank you. Every single time you do this, they respond the same way. Because it's an effective counter-strategy, General argued. Exactly, said. So what if you didn't engage the dreadnought? What if you ignored it completely and went straight for their supply ships? The room went quiet. On Lyra's, such a tactic would be considered dishonorable. You fought the strongest enemy first. That was the way. Admiral continued. They protect their dreadnoughts because they're expensive and take time to build. But supply ships, they assume you'll ignore those because they're not threats. If you destroy their supplies, their entire fleet becomes vulnerable. That's cowardly, Commander Bora said, shocked. That's winning, Minyu said flatly. You want to have a fair fight or you want to protect your people? Lyra found herself leaning forward, interested despite herself. She had never thought about warfare this way. Military strategy was based on honor, strength, and direct confrontation. These humans were talking about deception and psychological warfare. For the next 3 hours, the humans tore apart battle tactics. They showed pattern after pattern, weakness after weakness. It was brutal and humbling, but it was also brilliant. Explained how human forces had defeated a fleet at the Battle of. We pretended to retreat. They followed, thinking they had us beaten, but we led them into an asteroid field where we had hidden mines. They lost 30 ships before they realized it was a trap. You used deception, Lyra said. It wasn't a question. Yes, met her eyes. We use every advantage we can find. Deception, misdirection, psychological pressure. They think in patterns. So we give them patterns, then break those patterns at the worst possible moment for them. General looked troubled. This is not how we wage war. Then you'll keep losing, Admiral said gently but firmly. I respect your culture, but they don't care about honor. They care about consuming everything in their path. You can't defeat them by being noble. You defeat them by being smarter. After the meeting ended, most of the officers left quickly, clearly upset by what they had heard. Lyra stayed behind. She approached, who was studying a star map. Your people have been fighting for a long time, haven't they? She asked. Nodded. Our entire history is one long war. We fought animals to survive. Then we fought each other over food, land, resources. When we finally got to space, we fought over planets and trade routes. Even now, human nations don't always agree with each other. That sounds exhausting, Lyra said. It is, agreed. But it made us good at one thing, not losing. When you grow up knowing that every fight might be your last, you learn to fight smart, not just hard. Lyra thought about her own people. They had known peace for thousands of years before they came. They built beautiful things, created art, advanced their science. War was something they read about in history books, not something they lived every day. We're not prepared for this, are we? She said quietly. Not really. No, said honestly. But you can learn. That's what this alliance is for. We'll teach you how to fight like humans, and maybe you can teach us how to build a civilization worth protecting. Over the next week, Lyra attended every military briefing. She watched as the humans worked with officers, slowly breaking down their resistance to new ideas. It wasn't easy. Many refused to accept human methods. But some listened. Commander Bora, despite her initial resistance, started asking questions. She wanted to understand how humans thought about warfare. General remained skeptical but allowed small-scale tests of human tactics. Lyra also spent more time with, not as a future husband, but as someone who could explain human thinking. She was fascinated and disturbed by what she learned. One evening they sat in the palace garden. Lyra asked him, "Why are humans so good at violence?" Was quiet for a moment. "Because we had to be. Earth is a dangerous planet. It has predators that can kill you in seconds, diseases that wipe out entire cities, natural disasters that destroy everything. For most of human history, we lived on the edge of extinction." "But you survived," Lyra said. "We survived because we adapted," explained. "When we couldn't outrun predators, we made weapons. When we couldn't survive cold, we made fire and clothing. When other humans threatened us, we learned strategy and tactics. Every challenge made us stronger, smarter, more determined." "It sounds like suffering," Lyra said softly. "It was," admitted. "Still is sometimes. But that suffering taught us something important. It taught us that you don't have to be the strongest to win. You just have to refuse to lose." Lyra looked at this human sitting beside her. He was physically weaker than she was. He would live a fraction of her. His people had only recently joined the galactic community. By every measure, should be superior. Yet here he was, calmly explaining how his species had turned weakness into strength, suffering into wisdom, and endless conflict into an art form. "I underestimated humans," Lyra said finally. "Most species do," replied with a slight smile. "We're used to it." A message arrived on his communication device. He checked it, and his expression became serious. "There's news. A scouting force was detected near the outer colonies, 3 ships." "Should I alert the defense fleet?" Lyra asked, standing up. "Already done," said. "But Admiral wants to try something. She's asking permission to intercept them using human tactics." Lyra felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. This would be the first real test. "Yes," agreed. "If it works, maybe more of your people will trust us. If it fails—" He didn't need to finish. Lyra knew that if the humans failed, the military would never accept their help. The alliance would be political only, and the war would continue as before. "I'll speak to my mother," Lyra said. "She'll approve it." As she walked back to the palace, Lyra realized something had changed. She was no longer just tolerating this alliance. She was starting to believe in it. The humans weren't noble warriors like the. They were survivors who fought dirty and won anyway. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what her people needed to learn. The wedding was 1 week away. Lyra stood in her chambers, trying on the ceremonial robes she would wear. They were beautiful, woven with threads that glowed softly in the light. She should have felt excited or nervous. Instead, she felt nothing but duty. Outside her window, the capital city spread out below. Millions lived there, going about their lives, unaware that their princess was about to marry an alien to save them all. A sudden alarm shattered the peaceful morning. Lyra ran to her balcony. In the sky above, she could see flashes of light, explosions. The planetary defense grid was firing at something. Her heart sank. They had found them. The communication system in her room activated automatically. "All palace residents proceed to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Forces have entered the system. Multiple ships confirmed. Evacuate now." Lyra didn't panic. She had been trained for this. She grabbed her emergency kit and headed for the door. But when she opened it, the corridor outside was chaos. Servants and officials were running in all directions. Someone had been hurt. Debris blocked the main hallway. "The eastern wing is collapsing," someone shouted. "We can't get through." Lyra turned and ran toward the western corridors, following a group of courtiers. Behind her, she heard a terrible grinding sound. She looked back just in time to see part of the ceiling fall down, completely blocking the path they had just come from. They were trapped. The group ended up in a large ceremonial hall in the eastern section of the palace. About 15 huddled together, looking scared. The emergency lights flickered. Through the broken windows, they could see ships in the atmosphere, firing on the city's shields. "The atmospheric systems are failing," one of the courtiers said, checking a wall panel. "We need our specific air mixture. If it switches to standard oxygen, we'll suffocate." Lyra felt fear creep into her chest. Needed a specific combination of gases to breathe. Unlike humans who could adapt to different atmospheres or specialized, it was one of their few real weaknesses. "How long do we have?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Maybe 20 minutes before the air becomes toxic for us." Lyra tried her communication device. No signal. The attacks had damaged the systems. They were truly trapped, with no way to call for help and running out of breathable air. Then she heard sounds from beyond the debris, voices speaking in a language she recognized. Human language. "Clear this section. Move fast, we don't have much time." A hole appeared in the debris pile. Through it came a human in an environmental suit. It was "Princess," he called out when he saw her. "Are you injured?" "No, but we're trapped. The air systems are failing." "I know, we're getting you out." He turned and shouted to someone behind him. "Lieutenant, bring the emergency respirators." More humans came through the hole. Lyra recognized some of them from the military briefings. Lieutenant, a young woman with quick movements. Sergeant, a large man carrying heavy equipment. Private, who immediately started checking the wounded. "We have 15 people here," Lyra reported, slipping into military mode. "2 are injured, 1 seriously." Nodded. "We'll get them all out, but we need to move fast. The palace structure is unstable." "Why are you here?" Lyra asked. "You should be evacuating with everyone else." Looked at her like she had said something strange. "Because you needed help," he said simply. Then he turned to his team. "Corporal, set up the support beam there. We need to stabilize this section before we can move the injured." Lyra watched in amazement as the humans worked. They moved with incredible efficiency, each person knowing exactly what to do without being told. It was like watching a single organism with multiple bodies. Corporal, a thin woman who looked too small for such heavy work, positioned a portable support beam under a cracked section of ceiling. The beam extended with a hiss of hydraulics, taking the weight. The ceiling stopped groaning. "How did you find us?" Lyra asked. "We mapped the palace structure when we arrived," he explained while helping set up respirators for the. "When the attack started, we tracked which sections were cut off. Then we just worked through them one by one." "One by one? How many people have you already rescued?" "Your group is the 3rd. We got 41 people out so far." Lyra stared at him. "You came back, multiple times, into a collapsing building during an orbital bombardment." Shrugged as if it was nothing special. "It's our job." Another explosion rocked the palace. Part of the wall collapsed and toxic smoke started pouring in. They began coughing immediately. Lyra felt her throat burning. "Respirators now," ordered. The humans quickly fitted masks over the faces. Lyra felt clean air flowing into her lungs. The relief was immediate. "We need to move," Sergeant said. "This whole section is going to come down." But one of the injured couldn't walk. He was a palace guard named, and his leg was badly broken. He was also huge, even for a. He probably weighed 3 times what did. "Leave me," said weakly. "Save the others." "Absolutely not," said firmly. He turned to, "Help me get him up." "Captain, we should." "That's an order, Sergeant." Together and lifted. Lyra could see the strain on his face, the muscles in his arms trembling from the effort. But he didn't complain. He didn't slow down. He just carried the wounded guard through the debris, step by difficult step. They made their way through unstable corridors filled with smoke and falling debris. Twice, they had to change routes when paths collapsed ahead of them. The humans never hesitated. They just adapted and kept moving. At one point, a massive ceiling beam began to fall. It would have crushed half the group. Without thinking, Corporal threw herself forward. She activated her frame's emergency overload, bracing the beam with her entire body and the frame's enhanced strength. Metal screamed. The frame's power cells sparked dangerously. "Go," she shouted. "I can't hold this long." The group rushed past her. Lyra was the last one through. She looked back at this small human woman holding up tons of metal through sheer determination and technology. "Come on." Lyra reached back and grabbed S's arm. As soon as the last person was clear, released the beam and Lyra pulled her forward. The beam crashed down behind them, sealing off that corridor forever. "Why did you do that?" Lyra demanded. "You could have died." Looked confused by the question. "Because if I didn't, you would have died, obviously." They finally reached a stable section of the palace. Other rescue teams were there, evacuating more people. Medical staff rushed forward to help the injured. Lyra pulled off her respirator, breathing the controlled atmosphere of the safe zone. She watched and his team as they immediately prepared to go back into the danger zone. "Wait," she called to him. "You're going back in again." "There are still people trapped," said. "We detected life signs in the northern tower." "But you're injured." Lyra pointed to blood on his shoulder where debris had cut through his suit. "It's minor," said, and she could tell he truly believed it was. "We can rest when everyone is safe." Lieutenant handed out fresh oxygen tanks to the team. Sergeant checked his equipment. Private was already studying a map of the northern tower. These humans were exhausted. They were hurt. They were risking their lives for aliens they barely knew, and they acted like this was completely normal. "I'm coming with you," Lyra said suddenly. "Princess, that's not necessary. I know this palace better than anyone. I can guide you through the northern tower faster than any map." She looked him straight in the eyes. "And they're my people. I won't hide in safety while you risk everything to save them." Studied her face for a moment, then he nodded. "Sergeant, get the princess a suit." For the next 2 hours, Lyra worked alongside the human rescue team. She guided them through secret passages and forgotten corridors. She helped carry injured courtiers. She held hands with scared children while Lieutenant treated their wounds. She also saw things that would stay with her forever. She saw Private share her own water with a dehydrated servant, even though was clearly exhausted. She saw Sergeant use his own body to shield a group of children from falling debris. She saw Corporal talk calmly to a terrified elder, keeping her distracted while they navigated through a section that was actively on fire. And she saw this human captain who would soon be her husband work tirelessly without complaint. He didn't do it for glory or honor. He did it because people needed help, and he was able to give it. By the time the attack was finally repelled by the combined defense fleet, the humans had rescued over 200 from the collapsing palace. In the underground medical bay, Lyra sat against a wall, covered in dust and minor injuries. Sat down beside her, equally exhausted. "Your shoulder needs proper treatment," she said, looking at his injury. "Later," he said. "First I need to make sure everyone got out." Lyra looked at this strange human, this member of a species she had thought was primitive and weak. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you risk everything for us? We're not even your people." Turned to look at her. His eyes were tired but calm. "Because you needed help," he said, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. "And because I was able to give it, that's reason enough." In that moment, something fundamental shifted in Lyra's heart. She realized that strength wasn't just about how long you lived or how powerful your technology was. Strength was about what you did when everything was falling apart. It was about who you became when tested by fire. And by that measure, humans were the strongest species she had ever encountered. The attack had damaged a third of the capital city. Lyra walked through the recovery zones 3 days after the battle, seeing the destruction up close. Buildings had collapsed. Infrastructure was broken. Thousands had lost their homes. But everywhere she looked, she saw humans working alongside to rebuild. In one plaza, she found Private, the human combat medic. She had been working for nearly 40 hours straight, treating wounded. Lyra watched as carefully treated an elderly woman's burns, her hands steady despite obvious exhaustion. "You should rest," Lyra told her. Looked up and smiled tiredly. "After this patient, and maybe the next 3, we're short on medical staff right now." "But you're a combat medic, not a civilian doctor." "A medic is a medic," said, returning her attention to the patient. "Soldier or civilian or human doesn't matter. If someone needs help and I can give it, that's my job." Lyra noticed that was using techniques the doctors didn't know. "What is that treatment?" she asked, pointing to a strange device was using on the burn wounds. "It's a human technique. We call it regenerative cell therapy. It helps burns heal faster with less scarring," smiled at the elderly woman. "You'll be back to normal in about 2 weeks." The woman touched his hand gratefully. "Thank you, young one. You humans are strange, but you have kind hearts." Later, Lyra found Engineer in the Western District. He was working on a damaged power station that controlled life support for an entire residential area. The engineers had declared it beyond repair. They were planning to evacuate the district, but had other ideas. "Hand me that connector," he said to his assistant, pointing to a piece of equipment. "Sir," the chief engineer said, "this system cannot be fixed." "Your chief engineer is thinking inside the box," muttered, connecting wires in a pattern that looked completely wrong. "But I'm from Earth. We learned to think outside the box because our box was always too small and trying to kill us." "I don't understand." "Watch and learn." Finished his modifications and activated the system. It hummed, sputtered, then suddenly roared to life. Lights came on throughout the district. Life support systems stabilized. The assistant stared in shock. "How did you do that? That shouldn't work." "It shouldn't," agreed cheerfully. "But humans stopped caring about should a long time ago. We care about does it work, and this works." Lyra approached him. "You just saved 3,000 people from having to evacuate." Shrugged. "Just doing my job, princess. Besides, human engineering is mostly about making impossible things work anyway. We've been doing it since we figured out how to make fire by hitting rocks together." That evening, Lyra met with in what remained of the palace gardens. The attack had destroyed most of the beautiful plants, but some had survived. They sat on a bench, surrounded by rubble and scattered flower petals. "Your people don't give up, do they?" Lyra said. "Give up on what?" asked. "On anything, on anyone. I've watched them for days. They work until they literally cannot stay awake anymore. Then they sleep for a few hours and start again. Private has treated over 200 patients. Engineer has repaired systems that our own engineers said were impossible to fix. They just keep going." Nodded. "It's how we survived. Giving up means dying, so we don't give up." "But why help us? You could focus on your own people's safety." "Because you're people too," said simply. "Human doesn't matter, people are people, and people help each other. That's what separates us from monsters like the—" Lyra was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I've been reading about Earth, about human history." "It's not pretty," warned. "No, it's not," Lyra agreed. "It's full of wars, suffering, death. Your species has faced extinction more times than I can count. Plagues that killed millions, natural disasters that destroyed entire civilizations, wars that nearly ended your whole species." "We're good at surviving catastrophes," said with dark humor, "probably because we've had so much practice." "But that's not all I saw," Lyra continued. "I also saw how you recovered. Every single time you were knocked down, you got back up, you rebuilt, you learned, you became stronger." She turned to look at him. "Your entire history is one long story of refusing to stay defeated." "That's probably the kindest summary of human history I've ever heard," said. "I also learned about something called the human spirit," Lyra said. It's hard to define, but from what I understand, it's this quality your people have. This refusal to accept that something is impossible. This drive to keep trying even when logic says you should stop. Smiled slightly. Yeah, we're stubborn like that. It's more than stubbornness, Lyra said. I think it's hope. Humans hope even when there's no logical reason to hope, and that hope drives you to do impossible things. She thought about what she had seen over the past days. Humans working themselves to exhaustion to save aliens they had just met. Humans sharing their limited supplies with refugees. Humans teaching doctors and engineers new techniques, freely sharing knowledge that could have been kept secret. My people have lived in peace for so long, Lyra said quietly. We built beautiful cities, created amazing art, advanced our science, but we forgot something important. We forgot how to struggle, how to adapt, how to overcome. You're learning now, said. Because you're teaching us, Lyra replied. Not just military tactics, you're teaching us how to survive, how to keep going when everything seems hopeless, how to find strength we didn't know we had. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sunset. The sky was beautiful despite the destruction around them, maybe because of it. Can I ask you something personal? Lyra said. Of course. Do you resent this marriage? Being forced to marry someone you don't love for politics? Thought about it? At first, yes, I was angry. I'm a soldier. I wanted to fight, not play diplomat. And the idea of marrying someone I'd never met felt wrong. And now I think maybe the politicians got something right for once, said, smiling. You're intelligent, brave, and you actually care about your people. You could have stayed safe during the attack, but you came with us to rescue trapped civilians. That says a lot about who you are. Lyra felt something warm in her chest. I thought the same about you. During the attack, you could have evacuated, but you came back over and over to save people you didn't even know. You risked your life for strangers. They weren't strangers, corrected gently. They were people who needed help. That's the only category that matters. Is that a human thing, this need to help others? It's a decent person thing, said. But yeah, maybe humans take it further than most species. We've learned that survival isn't just about being strong. It's about cooperation, about helping each other. The humans who survived weren't the strongest individuals. They were the ones who worked together, who helped their communities, who refused to abandon others even when it was dangerous. Lyra understood now. The human strength wasn't physical. It wasn't even technological. It was social. It was moral. It was this deep belief that people mattered, all people, and that helping others was not just right but necessary for survival. Our wedding is in 4 days, Lyra said. Yes. I want you to know something. I'm not angry about it anymore. In fact, she hesitated, then continued, I'm glad it's you. Looked at her with surprise. I was wrong about humans, Lyra admitted. I thought you were primitive, weak, short-lived barbarians who got lucky with a few military victories, but I was judging you by the wrong standards. What standards should you have used? Character, determination, heart, Lyra smiled. By those standards, humans are the most advanced species I've ever encountered. You've turned suffering into wisdom. You've turned weakness into strength. And you've never, ever stopped believing that tomorrow can be better than today. That's probably the nicest thing anyone's ever said about humanity, said softly. It's just the truth, Lyra replied. My people are learning it now. The officers who initially rejected your tactics, half of them are now studying human military history. The engineers who said human methods were impossible, they're asking for lessons. The doctors are adopting your medical techniques. Change is hard, said. But necessary, Lyra finished. The won't stop, and to beat them we need to become more like humans, not physically, but mentally. We need to learn to adapt, to think creatively, to never give up. She stood up and looked at the damaged city. Somewhere out there, humans were working side by side, rebuilding what was broken, learning from each other, creating something new. You know what I realized, Lyra said. This alliance isn't about humans helping. It's about both our peoples creating something better together. Your strength with our knowledge, your adaptability with our stability, your hope with our resources. Stood beside her, a partnership. Yes, Lyra agreed. A real partnership, built on respect, not politics, on shared values, not just shared enemies. She turned to face him. I think we can make this work, not just the marriage, the whole alliance. We can save both our peoples and maybe teach the whole galaxy something important. What's that? That the strongest civilizations aren't built on power or technology. They're built on people who refuse to give up on each other. Extended his hand. Lyra took it. Their hands were different. His was smaller, warmer, more fragile, but the grip was firm and steady. To not giving up, said. To not giving up, Lyra echoed. And in that moment, she truly believed they wouldn't. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and gentle winds. The palace had been partially repaired, enough for the ceremony to take place in the grand hall. It was smaller than originally planned, simpler, but somehow more meaningful because of everything that had happened. Lyra stood in her preparation chamber, wearing traditional wedding robes. They were white with silver patterns that glowed softly. Her attendants had woven small lights into her hair, making her look like she wore a crown of stars. Her mother, Empress, entered the room. She looked at her daughter with pride and sadness mixed together. You look beautiful, the Empress said. Thank you, Mother. I know this wasn't what you wanted, Empress said gently. I know I asked you to sacrifice your own wishes for our people. That's a heavy burden for any daughter to carry. Lyra smiled. I'm not carrying a burden anymore, Mother. I'm choosing a partner. The Empress looked surprised. You've grown to care for him. I've grown to respect him, Lyra corrected. And respect is a better foundation for marriage than romance. Romance fades, but respect, built on shared values and proven character, that lasts. When did you become so wise? When I watched humans risk everything to save people they barely knew, Lyra said. When I saw them work themselves to exhaustion helping strangers. When I realized that strength isn't about being powerful. It's about being kind even when kindness is difficult. The Empress hugged her daughter. I'm proud of you, not just for doing your duty, but for seeing the truth that so many others miss. In another chamber, prepared for the ceremony, he wore his formal military uniform, dark blue with silver decorations. Admiral was helping him adjust his collar. Nervous? She asked. A little, admitted. I've faced battleships that scared me less than marriage. Laughed. That's because you understand battleships. Marriage is more complicated. Did you ever marry, Admiral? Once, long time ago, it didn't work out. His expression became distant. We were both soldiers, both stubborn. We forgot that being partners means more than just fighting on the same side. What does it mean? It means building something together. Not just surviving together, but creating a future you both believe in. She finished adjusting his uniform and stepped back. I think you and Princess Lyra have a chance at that. You've already been through a battle together. You've already proven you can trust each other when things get bad. Nodded. She's stronger than I expected, and I don't mean physically. Most people are, said. They just need a reason to show it. The ceremony began at noon. The grand hall was filled with both and humans, diplomats, military officers, common citizens. The attack had brought the two species closer together. Now they gathered to celebrate the union that symbolized their alliance. Lyra walked down the aisle. According to tradition, the bride walked alone, showing her independence before choosing to join with another. The hall was silent except for her footsteps. At the altar waited. He watched her approach, and Lyra saw something in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. Not love, not yet, but possibility, hope, a future they could build together. The ceremony was conducted by both an elder and a human official, blending both cultures. They spoke about unity, partnership, and the strength that comes from two becoming one. When it came time for vows, Lyra spoke first. She had written her own words, abandoning the traditional script. "Captain," she began, her voice clear and strong. "When we first met, I saw only our differences. You were human and I was. You were a soldier and I was a princess. You came from a species I thought was primitive, and I came from a civilization that thought itself superior." The crowd was completely silent. "I was wrong," Lyra continued. "I've learned that strength comes in forms I never expected. I've seen humans do impossible things simply because someone needed help. I've watched your people turn suffering into wisdom and weakness into determination. I've learned that the measure of a civilization isn't how powerful it is, but how it treats others when it has nothing to gain." She turned to address the entire hall, not just. "My people have lived in peace for thousands of years. We built wonders. We created beauty. We advanced our knowledge, but we forgot something crucial. We forgot how to struggle, how to adapt, how to keep going when everything seems lost." She turned back to, "You've reminded us, not through lectures or demands, but through action, through sacrifice, through simply being who you are." She took a breath. "So I make this vow not because I must, but because I choose to. I vow to stand beside you, to learn from you, to build a future with you that honors both our peoples, to never give up on us no matter what challenges we face. Because that's what humans do," she finished. "You never give up, and now neither will I." The crowd erupted in applause. Even the stoic generals were moved. Stepped forward for his vows. He had also written his own. "Princess Lyra," he said, "my people have a saying, home is where the heart is. For most of my life, my home was Earth or whatever ship I was stationed on. I never thought I'd find home with someone from another species on another world." He smiled. "But I've learned that home isn't about where you're from. It's about who you're with, who you trust, who you'd fight beside, and who you'd build with." He paused. "You could have stayed safe during the attack. You didn't have to come with us into danger, but you did. Not because it was your duty, but because you cared about your people. That told me everything I needed to know about who you really are. I vow to respect you," continued, "to treat you as an equal partner, not a political arrangement. I vow to protect you, not because you're weak, but because protecting those we care about is what makes us strong. I vow to build a future with you that brings our peoples together, that shows the galaxy what's possible when different species choose cooperation over conflict." He reached out and took her hand. "And I vow to never give up on us," he said, "because giving up isn't what humans do. And if you'll let me, I'll spend my life teaching you all the other stubborn, hopeful, impossible things that humans believe in." The crowd applauded again, louder this time. The elder pronounced them married according to both and human traditions, and Lyra faced each other. In human tradition, they would kiss. In tradition, they would press their foreheads together and let their bioluminescent patterns sink in a display of unity. They did both. The celebration lasted 3 days. Humans and ate together, shared stories, learned about each other's cultures. The initial awkwardness faded as they discovered common ground. Both species valued family. Both loved music, though their styles were different. Both understood sacrifice and duty. On the 3rd day, news arrived from the front lines. The combined human fleet had engaged a major force. Using tactics that blended technology with human strategy, they had won decisively. They had retreated for the first time in 5 years. When the news reached the celebration, both humans and cheered together. This was what their alliance could accomplish. Lyra and stood on the palace balcony, watching the celebrations below. The city was still damaged, still recovering, but it was alive. It was fighting back. It was refusing to give up. "What happens now?" Lyra asked. "We keep fighting," said. "They won't stop just because we won one battle, but they know now that we're not easy prey anymore." No, Lyra agreed. We're not. She leaned against him, feeling comfortable for the first time in weeks. You know what the best part of all this is? What? I get to watch my people become more like yours, not losing who we are but gaining what you have, that determination, that hope, that refusal to accept defeat. And we get to learn from you, said, your patience, your long-term thinking, your ability to build things that last. He put his arm around her. Together, we might actually create something amazing. 6 months later, Princess Lyra stood on the bridge of the new flagship, the Perseverance. It was a joint construction, combining human engineering. Half the crew was, half was human. They worked together seamlessly now, the initial cultural barriers long since broken down. Captain commanded the ship, with Lyra as his diplomatic and strategic advisor. They had fought 3 battles together, won all 3, though were being pushed back steadily. More importantly, other species were watching. They saw the human alliance and what it accomplished. Some were approaching with their own proposals for cooperation. Ambassador from the Republic is requesting a meeting, Lieutenant reported. They want to discuss a potential alliance. Lyra smiled. Tell them we're very interested. After the shift ended, Lyra returned to their quarters. It was a small space, but it was theirs, decorated with items from both their cultures, a home built from 2 worlds. Do you ever regret it? Asked as they prepared for sleep, being forced into this marriage. Lyra pretended to think about it. Well, I had to marry a human who's stubborn, reckless, and thinks rules are suggestions rather than laws. Guilty on all counts. But he's also brave, kind, and taught me that giving up is never an option. She kissed him gently. So no regrets. Good, said, because I'm not planning to make this easy on you. I wouldn't expect anything less from a human. They settled in for the night, 2 beings from different worlds who had become partners, friends, and eventually something more. Their marriage had started as a political arrangement. It had become a symbol of hope for an entire alliance. Outside their window, stars filled the darkness. Somewhere out there they were regrouping. Other threats existed, unknown and waiting. But aboard the Perseverance, nobody was worried, because they had learned the most important lesson humanity could teach. You don't have to be the strongest to win. You just have to refuse to lose. And together, the Empire and the Human Federation would never stop fighting for the future they believed in. A future where different species worked together, where strength came from unity, where hope was stronger than fear. A future worth building, worth protecting, worth never ever giving up on. They had awakened something when they attacked They had forced a peaceful species to seek help from warriors, and in doing so, they had created an alliance that would change the galaxy forever. Because now the galaxy knew, humanity, fuck yeah. And the who fought beside them, they understood now. They had learned from the best teachers possible. They had learned to be human. Not in body, but in spirit, in determination, in the absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. And that made all the difference.